Little is known about Ilya Gerber. What we know comes from his diary and the recollections of a few former fellow students. Ilya was born on July 23, 1924, in Kovno. His father was Boris Gerber, a well-known music teacher and conductor. His mother was not mentioned in his diary, and her name and background is unknown. His sister Kay was married to a man named Shalom, but details of their marriage are unknown. At the outbreak of World War II in September of 1939, Ilya was 15 years old. On July 10, 1941, the Germans moved Jews of Kovno into a ghetto across the Vilja River in the suburb of Sloboka. The ghetto was sealed on August 15 with 30,000 Jews inside. 10 months later, in August 1942, 18-year-old Ilya began writing his third diary in Yiddish. Through his writing, we can tell Ilya and his family were a part of the privileged class of the ghetto. They were able to use proteski or pull to avoid harsh work details and even to be released from jail. Because of his privileges, his family was fairly good in terms of food and social activity. The way he lived in the ghetto is in stark contrast to the images that come from the majority of the ghetto accounts. In fact, Ilya seemed to observe rather than participate in the events taking place around him. However, he did recognize the injustice of the system, and this influenced his diary. As with many diaries of the time, Ilya's diary was filled with colorful sketches of all aspects of ghetto life. He filled in the text, invented drawings, and doodles. He was a gifted chronicler who had a keen eye for detail. He was able to put the things he saw that day into words and images. He was extremely good at characterizing typical scenes from the ghetto in all its ugliness and absurdity. He described the daily routine of Jews forced to bribe Lithuanian and Jewish policemen in order to feed their families. Ilya not only recorded his social life, but also specific historical events, such as the hanging of Mek, who attempted to escape and shot at the German commander of the ghetto guard. He also recorded the creating of music. Ilya had a separate songbook in which he recorded new songs, their subject and content, and other factors. This songbook survived with his diary through the war. Ilya's diary captured something that was fairly rare in the ghetto: his relationship with Heini S. The diary shows the budding love affair, the whole arc of their relationship, and the eventual cooling of their feelings and the end of their relationship. Doodles of her initials appear throughout the diary, sometimes intertwined with Ilya's, and sometimes inside of hearts.
September 8th, 1942. It was in town that I first saw her, Heini. She was mostly with another group, was always happy, so it appeared to me, looking from the side, and cheerful. I found out her first name and family name, and looked upon her as a pretty girl, but you could say that I cared for her a lot, since I had not seen her up close. Going past her, I would glance at her, just as I might at my former friends, some of them even now. One look, one little bit of admiration, one stronger heartbeat, and that's it. As if it never happened. 1942, my relationship. The beach season commenced. There I saw her again. After not having seen her for a long time, I might have forgotten her. I had liked her only as a pretty girl. But now, when we saw each other at the beach, a feeling of restlessness and longing filled my heart. I was drawn to her. Several times our eyes met between the water and the sand on the beach, but I did not greet her. She recognized me. I knew her and wanted to get to know her, but I was unable to greet her. My own lack of boldness with her seemed a bit comical to me, but that is part of my character. I wanted to greet her, and I didn't do it. Had I greeted her, we would have had the opportunity to talk, and I was afraid of that. If I spoke to her a few times at least, I would go to pieces completely. I would fall in love. I felt it, and that is why I wanted to avoid it. I already know what love means. I know that suffering is. Don't laugh, because I've already experienced it. I wanted to avoid it. I didn't want any worries and heartache. I didn't want it, and I did want it. I was drawn to it as a magnet. I felt that I would have to surrender. I cannot fight love. I knew the period of love means jealousy and suffering and also arguments. I foresaw it all. I knew it all, but I had to bow my head. For whom? For Heine. Because in my heart I silently loved her because she had conquered me.
September 18th, 1942. Among those rounded up for work at Palamon, my friend Beek Cott was caught. Beek was a schoolmate of mine, a merry fellow. In town he lived near us, in the same street. They had a bakery on Nimu Street. His sister was run over by an automobile and killed. In the ghetto, during the Great Action of October 28, 1941, his mother, who was ill, and his father were taken away to the Ninth Fort. Beek remained alone. His father had money. He buried it, but Beek did not know where it was. However, he did not lose his bearings. He even supported an aunt. He even had fights with the Jewish police, and for that he was frequently sat in jail. He could not tolerate their misdeeds. Since mostly it was single people who were sent to Palamon, he was dragged out of his bed in the middle of the night. The next morning, the day after Beek was put in the jailhouse, it was from there that people were sent to Palamon, Ezek was walking past the so-called prison. "Ezek, help me! Try to get me out of here! Save me!" Ezek raised his head to the iron-grated window. A pair of dark, sad eyes looked out at him. Both school friends gazed at each other, one of them with a pleading look, calling for help, the other with astonishment and sympathy. But Ezek was unable to help Beek. How? In what way? It was impossible at that moment. Beek had no one and is without pull, so he was taken away.
September 24, 1942. Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur have already passed. We have them behind us. I want to mention that the population tried to be devout during this time of repentance. People organized minyanim, religious quorums in private homes. The synagogue was closed by the Germans on the 26th of last month. Some people tried to fast, some of them did in fact fast, while others ate like in the good old days. Finished praying, finished beating their breasts, people had a bite to eat, and Yom Kippur was gone without a trace. Gone, left behind, people have forgotten about it. November 1, 1942. Entry written that night. Today I brought back from Heine the book The Diary of Kessler Project. There were between Heine and Ilya short, abrupt words, silent, dull glances, a brief handshake, and that was it, as if there had never been anything. Papa tells us his impressions of the ceremonial oath of the police officers in the yeshiv. Everything was successfully performed. The police swore to the labor office that all orders they receive from the higher ghetto authority they will carry out in the spirit of integrity, without regard to any external obstacles, because that is what was required of them. They swore that in case of an extreme situation arises in the ghetto, there will be no, "This one is my brother, my sister, this one is a stranger." All must be equal at such a moment. No favoritism must be shown. There are no obligations of the Jewish policeman.
November 5th, 1942. Since the 3rd of November, I have been working in Boston. Boston is the name of a factory that dates from the good old pre-war times. Now the machinery of the factory has been sent deep into Germany, and the factory has been transformed into a big automobile garage. Here in the garage work 30 Jews, more or less skilled workers, and about 5 Lithuanians. The supervisor is a German Meister specialist, a Nazi party member, but still a decent person. He doesn't yell at you, jokes from time to time, and understands your feelings. Lunch is the time when business deals are made. Some daring fellows made a hole in the fence, and from there they scatter in all directions. These men bring back with them hundreds of pounds of flour, beets, potatoes, macaroni, and green vegetables. Naturally, they want to be compensated for the risk they have taken, and you cannot blame them. For potatoes, people pay here 15 rubles per kilogram, beets 20, butter 700, macaroni 140, rye flour 60 rubles, 2 kilos of bread 130 rubles. We knock off work at 4 o'clock. We arrive at the ghetto about 6. The inspection at the gate, when we go through the Varnu Street gate, goes pretty well today. The Lithuanian policeman has been given 40 marks, and the brigade goes through without incident. The policeman, a high-ranking officer, pats everyone but confiscates nothing. I'm the last to go through. I had 3 kilos of rye flour, 5 kilos of potatoes, and 2 kilos of beets. The flour I hid around my stomach, and the rest I carried in a bag. The policeman patted me from top to bottom, including my stomach, taped my compress, a girdle with a compartment for smuggling food, thoroughly, and shoved me into the ghetto without saying a word.
November 15th, 1942. 10 minutes ago, Fane Dembosch ran into our house. She says that half an hour ago an assassination was attempted against the ghetto commander. It happened this way. A certain watchmaker named Mech tried to crawl through the fence with a package. The commandant noticed Mech and wanted to detain him. Mech shot at him but missed. Mech was arrested. As soon as the higher ranks of the labor office found out about this, they closed the offices and convened the council members. Fane adds that the Gestapo men have already entered the ghetto. We all wondered, a Jew should have a weapon on him? Such a thing has never been heard of. Hard to believe that a Jew would have the audacity to hold a revolver in his hand and shoot from it too. It is more likely to be a provocation, either from the ghetto commandant or from the Lithuanians. November 18th, 1942. A drawing of a man hanging on a gallows, a skeleton with a bow and arrow, and a skull and crossbones. Last night, Dora told me that Mech will be hanged today. Today, coming back from my brigade through the Varnu Street gate, we were told that Mech is hanging near the committee Jewish Council offices. Actually, we already knew it at about noon, working at the Boston factory. When I went through the gate, it was already very dark, and although I looked for the spot of the hanged Mech, I could not find it. My heart would not let me ask a Jewish passerby. How could the words even be uttered? Where is Mech hanging? I couldn't do it. The words sounded too simple, and at the same time too cruel. As my mother tells it, they hanged Mech at exactly noon. There arrived many Yales in taxis, on horseback, on motorcycles, and on foot. They came with one object, to see the Jew hang. The inhabitants of the surrounding streets were driven to the hanging place. Before the hanging, Mech was asked what he wanted before his death. He said, "I want to go as a sacrifice for my family." I asked, "Let my mother and sister go free." Poor Mech didn't know that his mother and sister had been sent to the 9th Fort an hour before. November 19th, 1942. Today at noon, they took Mech down from the gallows. Yesterday evening, I wanted to go over to him, but my heart did not let me. For a couple of minutes I looked from a distance at the black, swaying body and walked away whistling. Why whistling, of all things? To cheer myself up? I don't know. Maybe so. This morning on my way to work, I saw the body hanging again, but again went by without stopping. At 12 o'clock precisely, he was buried in the Jewish cemetery. The whole time Mech was hanging, 2 Jewish policemen stood by his body. Every 2 hours they were changed. This was kind of Garb's Sargabai, a guard of honor.
December 4, 1942. Drawing of a menorah with 2 candles. Today is the second candle lighting of Hanukkah. Miracles are not evident in the present century. They took place or happened when we did not yet exist. Evidently, the luck of the Jews of old was greater than our luck. It is not our luck, alas, for miracles to happen to us. The people creates bit by bit, writes down, and express the pain of Jewish life in song. December 20, 1942. Drawing of 3 musicians in ragged clothes playing a drum, a violin, and a cello outside on the street. Today, Sunday, there is a concert for the ghetto administration. The concert took place at 12 o'clock noon. Until now, concerts used to take place about 4 o'clock, but since yesterday, when the wires were cut and no more electricity is provided, except for the very important institutions and the workshops leaving the ghetto in the dark, they happen earlier, when it is still light outside. At about noon, I was at Salk's. Salk was still lying in bed. When he heard that there was a possibility of hearing the concert, he was ready in 10 minutes. At 1:45, we were ready at just about 2:16, near the former yeshiva. At the door there were a pair of Jewish policemen. We find ourselves inside, quite a long and wide space, adorned with thick pillars and in the middle. This is the concert hall. At the end of a platform, along both sides, a painted design representing two harps. In the middle of the platform, two stars of David. We sidled our way into a corner. In the front row where we were sitting, two Lithuanian big shots. The orchestra performed several numbers, which in general were well received by the audience. The conductor, Hofmeckler, bowed graciously to the applause. The newly appointed Columnführer, column leader of the labor brigade of the airfield, Sachs, sang two songs and then just stopped. Next to the last number that the orchestra performed was Kol Nidr. The concert was over.
Later that day, Ilya was walking with his friends Salk and Babek. Halt! We suddenly hear a command. Behind us are standing two ghetto policemen. I recognize Officer Ilka Yoshun Grinberg, commander of the 1st Precinct of the Kovno Ghetto Police. He asks Salk, "Where do you work?" "In the vocational school," comes the reply. "And you?" "Also in the vocational school," says Babik. "And what about you, Gerber?" "In Boston," I boldly reply. "Did you work today?" "Not today, but I did the whole week." "Give me your work card," he says resoundingly. That surprises me. A close acquaintance, a former Gimnazia teacher of mine, and a good friend of our family. He's the one who arrests me? I try to talk him out of it. It doesn't help. "Go, Salk! Tell them at our house. I've been nabbed." The boys disappear. I walk with Officer Grinberg and am amazed. For the moment I was angry with him. On the way, the commander, Grinberg, caught several other people who were not working on Sunday, and led us all away to the office of the jail on the corner of Krisikukeo. We went through a small door in a high barbed wire fence and entered the narrow corridor of the former Jewish school. The low ceiling and narrow passageways are perfectly suited for a jail. The jail office is on the left, a four-sided room, the ceiling practically on top of your head, and filled with policemen.
January 1st, 1943. We, the Jews, stand on the threshold of 1943. Of this year, it was said that the Jews will see it. They will not survive that long. At the beginning of 1942, people were already saying in the ghetto that the Führer had stated in 1943 you would have to look in a museum to find a Jew. The Jew, the people cursed by Der Stürmer as the criminal of all crimes, the one responsible for the World War, betrayer of nations, the enemy of the people, the parasite who lives at the expense of other, the Bolshevik, the capitalist, the eternal explorer, upon whose head all curses are heaped, guilty of everything. He, yes, he, has survived to a new year, the year 43. That is why our little Jews smashed glasses, said Mazel Tov to one another, and caroused. For a whole week they did not despair. They lived well, they ate, they gulped down, they snacked. They overcame their hard-heartedness. They didn't get enough sleep, let alone the young people. They want to take in everything. An old story. Der Stürmer writes the same thing. Jews want to take over the world and enslave and destroy everyone, and carry on and dance and sing like the good old days. My final concern at the moment of writing these lines is, where do I find a new notebook, a new diary? Tell me, maybe you know where to get it? I will be most grateful to you for it. Basta, enough.
In July of 1944, Kovno Ghetto was liquidated, and the vast majority of Jews in Kovno perished. The irony is that, in the end, Ilya and his family's Protetsky did not save them from death, but only postponed it. Ilya and his family are presumed to have perished, although nothing specific is known about their fate.